Hey, I want to talk a bit about the journalist and commentator Yasmin Alibhai-Brown and the direction I feel that she's taken in the last few years, which is pretty regressive. Now, why focus on her? Well, I started off having quite a lot of respect for Yasmin Alibhai-Brown because I think she was a prominent Muslim woman who was saying things that needed to be said. Just in case you don't know who she is, like I say, she's a journalist and commentator. Um, just over 10 years ago, she was one of the founders of the British Muslims for Secular Democracy. I became involved in that organization, at least secondarily involved, insofar as I contribute to it online for a very long time. I engage in lots of debates, discussions, and I saw it, which is what it was, as a Muslim led initiative to take on Islamists, to take on Islamist terrorism, to take on Islamist ideology. Now, Yasmin Alibhai Brown has had a consistent track record in condemning Islamism. She has had a consistent record in terms of condemning misogyny within Islam and regressive cultural practices. And I give her credit for all of that. Um, but about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a split on in the online group, and I'm not going to get into the nitty and gritty of this because it's been all exhausted online, and I've been part of that. But suffice to say, there was a split online, and the split came about because people on the regressive left were starting to get into the group and trying to make it go in their direction, which was basically about pushing a victimhood narrative, i.e., Muslims in the West are victimized. That is, in a very, very summarized way, the sort of direction it was going in. Now, there's a few things I want to reference regarding Yasmin Alibhai Brown. The other day, she had a piece and it's entitled White Right Wing Men Are the Real Snowflakes. I'll just show you the article. She's basically talking about well, this is to summarize it. Their ideas are now more assertively challenged. They find that hard. And strangely, she quotes Professor Jordan Peterson in this, as if he's some sort of alt right figure. Um, I really don't understand why Professor Peterson is constantly put into the same ranks as neo Nazis and other unpleasant characters. I follow Peterson's work and I think he just is a voice of common sense. But anyway, that's the idea. She's basically turning the argument back and saying, actually, the real snowflakes are right wing men. I've encountered a few hard right wingers, and it is true that some of them are overly sensitive and they do read into things that aren't there. And they will have a knee jerk reaction the way many in the left do. But um, I think there is a lot of aspects of her arguments that are hypocritical. So, another example of this, she appeared on Talk Radio October last year, hosted by Matthew Wright. Now, this was about controversial comments she made regarding the Leicester City helicopter crash last year. 5 people died. A big tragedy for the city. And this is what she tweeted: Leicester City Football Club. Listen to how they mourn for a man who was a foreigner cosmopolitan, person of nowhere, in Theresa May's words. What do your white nativist influencers have to say about that? Now, whatever way you look at it, that's quite an inflammatory tweet to make. Matthew Wright is totally biased. He admits that he's her friend. So throughout the interview, he basically lets her play it down, doesn't really challenge her. She claims that she was having a go at Theresa May as opposed to Leicester City fans. And she praised the city of Leicester as being a good example of diversity. But here's the issue I take with Yasmin Alibhai Brown. She is an utter hypocrite. She says, and she said it in this interview, I'll put a link, oh, why is it when I'm speaking up, I get silenced? You know, I mean, she loves nothing more than to put this halo of victimhood around herself. But she makes this argument like she's only being challenged because she's a minority woman. That's rubbish. the sort of things that she comes out with. I mean, let's put it this way: she once joked, as she put it, about white men dying off, white middle-aged men just dying off. Now, her excuse for that was, oh, well, 20, so she claims, white guys have approached me in the last so many years, or it might have been last 20 years, so many white men have come to me. But just consider for a second that a white journalist, white male journalist, said ethnic minority women should just disappear. You can imagine the outcry there would be over that. So she's getting resentful about the backlash, and Matthew Wright quoted some, granted they were vitriolic and nasty comments. I don't think that's a way to challenge hypocrisy, but this kind of reminds me of that exchange between Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson. Um, Certain people can give, but they can't take. So they think they can insult people and show sexism and racism, but only if they're female and only if they're a minority. Um, and then if there's a bit of backlash, then they just wrap themselves in a victimhood mentality. I thought Matthew Wright came across as very weak and biased. He admitted that she's his friend, so no wonder he's making absolutely no attempt to hold her to account. Um, but I really think Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, in setting up the British Muslims for Secular Democracy, she was doing an important thing, and I give her credit for that. But over the last few years, everything is about the white establishment. It's about awful white people. It's about white men in particular. And she seems to think it's fine for her to say all that stuff. People aren't challenging you, Yasmin, because you are a minority woman. They're challenging you because you're displaying bigotry, plain and simple. You can't make these casual generalizations and expect people to be okay with that. And it's a galling hypocrisy I find hard to stomach. Here's another thing. If she talks about such issues as misogyny in Islam, honor killings, and so on, that's fine. But if a white man was to do it, she would say, oh, he's pandering to the far right. So it's kind of a case of I can do it, but no one else can. I think she's a rank hypocrite. And whilst I once respected her, now I've got no time for her because I think she's become a personification of the regressive left. Not totally, because she does still speak out on those things. Whereas, the regressive left don't, they just ignore them and they say it's all bigotry to say that. But what Yasmin does do is she race baits beyond belief. She molds everything about because I'm a minority woman and because you're a white man. She insults people and then, plays the victim when that is turned back on her. I've no time for that. I'm pretty outspoken. If I was to be in the public sphere, if I was a journalist or a radio presenter and people insulted me, I'd like to think that I would take it on the chin, so to speak, and say, well, I'm being outspoken. People are not going to like this. I'll defend myself if I think the criticism's unfair. But what I find utterly cowardly, to be honest, and reprehensible is when people hide behind the fact they're uh, part of a certain demographic, a minority or a woman or whatever it might be, or a man for that matter, whatever it is. I think double standards infuriate people. And what Yasmin Alibhai-Brown is doing is saying, oh, it's fine for me to race bait, it's fine for me to insult people, but as soon as I'm challenged, oh, it must be because I'm a minority person. It's really galling. And I'm not uploading this to defend right wing men. Hell, I can take a lot of issues with right wing men. You know, um, the average Trump supporter and I would agree on almost nothing. So this is not about necessarily disagreeing with her politics. It's about the way she goes about it. I just think it's hypocritical. So if you're familiar with her, let me know your thoughts. I will say this though. I mean, Matthew Wright was quoting some pretty unpleasant response tweets, and this was the same situation with Kathy Newman. The way to challenge hypocrites like Yasmin Alibhai-Brown on their hypocrisy is not to show misogynistic, sort of vitriolic rants. It's to challenge them smartly, assertively, and accurately. Um, I don't think she's a bad person. but I think that she has definitely pandered to a lot of this regressive mentality. I mean, she seems to think this is what I find really galling. She's been right about a lot of things in terms of the misogyny within Islam and so on. But if I said it, she'd say I'm Islamophobic. Now, why is it okay for her to talk about those things, but me or another white person said it, then oh, you're pandering to the far right, you're Islamophobic, etc. That's what I find particularly galling about Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. And that interview obviously pissed a lot of people off. 59 likes, 261 dislikes. To me, that says people can see it's just she's getting a free ride, and it's pathetic.